I spoke with a client this morning who was just absolutely devastated. She was working on the first step of the 7 pillars of a happy and successful life and was exploring the personal section of that and what mattered to her to create success in her life from a personal standpoint. And so she was listing things that were attributes that mattered to her. And she was talking with a friend about what it was she was doing. And she listed one of the attributes as being compassionate. And her friend burst out laughing. And it just absolutely broke her heart because she was convinced that she was compassionate. And how could this friend not see her as being compassionate? And so as we talked about this, we talked about authenticity. And we talked about how who we are is perceived by other people. And when what they perceive and what we aspire to be, who we believe we are in alignment, we become authentic. We're perceived as being authentic. And so let's set aside her experience for a minute, and I'll come back to it. But I challenged her. I said, list 3 attributes of character that you believe are important to you that would describe you. And then reach out to 6 people in your life. Maybe a family member, somebody that you work with, somebody in your neighborhood, a personal friend, somebody you go to church with, people from different areas of your life that will know you in different capacities. And ask them for a description for 3 words that they would use to describe you. And you've got to be willing to take a risk. And you've got to reach out to people who are willing to be honest. And they're more committed to being honest and helping you in that way than they are in maybe sparing your feelings if there's something that they feel might be hurtful or offensive to you. And so you need to choose people that you trust to be honest, and you need to explain to them that it's really important to you that they be honest and that you're not going to be offended. You just absolutely need the truth as they perceive it. So if in this instance, let's say, compassion was one of her core values, and she was reaching out to these people, and compassion showed up in several of those responses, then that's an area in which she was definitely authentic, because who she was striving to be, and who other people were perceiving her as being were consistent. Now, if somebody sees something that's wonderful in you and they say you're brilliant, and you didn't list that as one of your core values that you thought you were brilliant, nobody's going to be upset. But what if it comes back and somebody says, well, you're really kind of selfish? That is kind of hard to hear. And so let's take a look at that. Now, if one person says you're selfish, maybe it's time to step back and take a look at your relationship with them and what it is that they might perceive that would cause them to perceive you in that particular way. Maybe there's something that happened recently where you didn't do what they wanted you to do and they decided you were selfish. Maybe there's a longer history of something there. But if 3 or 4 or 5 people say you're selfish or something else you don't want to hear, it's really time to step back and to take a look at what it is that they are seeing that is not consistent with who you think you are, unless of course you've said, well, I really am pretty selfish, in which case you're being authentic. It may not be desirable, but you're being authentic because there's the consistency there. But let's assume that that is not one of the words that you have chosen to describe yourself. So the question then becomes, what is it that they are perceiving that is causing many of the people in your life to perceive you as being selfish? Well, it really kind of tends to come from 2 places. One place is you're selling yourself a bill of goods and you are not seeing how you are selfish. And it's time to step back and do an honest assessment and take a look and decide if you want to change that, or if you're simply going to own it and say, hey, selfish is part of who I am. That's your choice. But that's not the choice most of us want to make. Sometimes it comes from a place of self-protection. Now, let me give you an example of that. When I was in college, one evening, my roommates and I were walking down the street. I don't remember what we were talking about, but there were 4 of us. 2 of the girls were girls that I had just met that semester as roommates, and one of them was my best friend from home, and that relationship barely survived living together. But something was said, I don't remember what it was. I just remember saying, well, I love people. And Diana, my best friend from home, burst out laughing and said, you've got to be kidding me. You don't love people. I was heartbroken. I was devastated. I felt judged. I was angry. And I clammed up. I was not going to risk opening my mouth and getting hurt further. But here's the piece that Diana didn't know. In spite of the fact that she had known me for quite a number of years as we were growing up, she didn't have a clue that I had been sexually abused by my father all that time. Nobody knew that. And so there was a protective shell, a facade there that kept a part of me hidden to protect me, because I was so afraid of being judged if somebody knew that. How would they perceive me? This was long before anybody talked about sexual abuse in the public arena. And so I had this shell of competence and capability and having it all together. Hey, it was firmly in place, let me tell you. It was just, nobody was getting through that shell. Because that was the only way I had to protect myself. Because I was terrified of judgments. I was terrified of how other people would perceive me, of how they would think less of me. And so I had to keep part of myself hidden behind that shell. And the part of me that was hidden was the part that even then genuinely loved and cared about other people. And so I wasn't authentic. And so Diana was responding to the shell, to what she saw. But my heart was broken because I knew what was behind the shell. Now, I didn't have the wisdom and the maturity at that time to understand that she couldn't see that and that she was responding to the shell. Well, fast forward many years to my client this morning and her being devastated because somebody told her that she was simply not compassionate. And so, you know, we talked about authenticity. We talked about what compassion looked like to her. We talked about what maybe compassion looks like to the person who made this statement. And we talked about the legacy of voices that are in the back of our heads and how we can get rid of them and a lot of other things that there's not time or space for on this video. But here's the reason I bring the subject up. We're talking a lot about authenticity. We're talking a lot about understanding other people and their stories and where they come from, and that their life experience may be different than our life experience. And one of the keys to connecting with other people is having them recognize our authenticity, that we are who we say we are, we don't have a hidden agenda, and that they can trust us because they know us, and there's what they see is what they get. And that really is what authenticity is about. And so understanding how authentic you are starts with the desire to know, and then the willingness to risk, and then choosing the right people, and trusting them to be honest with you, and then being open to whatever it is that they tell you, and then to choose what you're going to do about it. Now, there may be times where you decide to discount somebody's opinion because you can see how, given a particular circumstance, from their perspective, they might view you in a less than desirable way. But be slow to come to that conclusion. It's easy to rationalize. You know, I think most of us have a PhD in rationalization. We're really, really good at it. And just because somebody else says something doesn't make it true. But when they say something, we would be wise to consider it and to evaluate it and determine the level of truthfulness that it has, and then use that as a way to learn and to grow and to become a better version of ourselves. You know, if I'm better today than I was yesterday, it doesn't mean that I wasn't authentic yesterday. It means that today I have grown and that I have learned something new about me, about the world, about whatever, and I can step up my authenticity because I'm different than I was yesterday. So we are evolving people, but don't be afraid to take the risk to find out who others perceive you as being. You may be absolutely thrilled with what you hear. You may be a whole lot more amazing in their eyes than you give yourself credit for being. You may also find that there's, a little bit of Swiss cheese and there's a hole there, rather than it being solid like a nice block of Monterey Jack. Well, that's fine. Better that you should know it, because that then gives you the choice to do something about it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about authenticity. Leave me your comments below. And if you want to talk more, you know where to find me. Talk again soon.